Alright, we are ready for reassembly and installation of this Northwest Shortline motor. If you remember, this is the motor that I found that came with it, and we did wire it with one of those little stand-in strips that I made. And the way I have this set up is, here's the frame, and the old frame mounted light socket was right here at the front. That's our front. Whoever did this the first time around, they did a little milling here, and they shaved down here, 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 and here, so this motor would fit. Then they had made this little foam sticky pad thing to hold the motor in. It didn't really hold the motor in place, but it is the right height to get the flywheels so that they don't touch the frame. So I'm going to keep it. Got my Bondo fuel tank I made here, and we'll just go ahead and we're going to install it. So what we're going to do first is let's put the trucks on. Now if you remember, I took these trucks off a dummy SD40T-2. In order to get them to work on this C44, what I needed to do was at the very edge here, okay, right here, I just hit this with the disc sander just a little bit to give me some room so I can turn this way underneath the frame. Okay, and as I said before, when I do it, I make red wire is right. So as the locomotive goes forward this way, this is the right hand side, engineer side, I want my red wire on that side, and that's the way I have these trucks set up right now, where I soldered my black and red wires on here. So I'm going to go ahead and feed these through. Okay. And this part of the truck goes towards the fuel tank. And I should have both red wires now are on the right hand side of the frame as it is facing forward. Okay. These are pretty easy to do. Alright, now previously I put a drop of oil, a pinhead's worth, on the thrust washer between this nut and the worm on both sides. Okay, and there's just a tiny bit of grease on there. We'll just install these. Okay, and then we take these brackets, clip them back on. Alright, now there have been some modifications made to this. We're going to have to see if we can figure out what they are. I see that there is some kind of a piece that prevents slack in this shaft in here. So we got to figure out which shaft goes where. I'm guessing the slack goes on the short side, probably. The way I've also set up, the way I've wired this motor is so that this label is facing me when I am looking at the locomotive facing right. Okay, that looks like it's right. There is another problem I noticed, is that on every single one of these, it looks like one of these little pins is missing. But it's on every single piece that has a pin on it. And not being familiar with this particular drive here, maybe that's the way it is. Looks like to me they've been shaved off for some reason. But we're going to give it a try. So basically the motor would go in like this. Now if I've got this right, maybe that's not the right one. Maybe the long one goes on that side. It didn't seem to work out. Let's put the long one on here. Alright, well the long one does fit in there. Let's go ahead and put the other worm in. Get this worm gear in here. Now, when you're doing this for your first time, I suggest taking some pictures as you're doing your disassembly, just as a guide to how it goes together. You can use the literature from that came with the locomotive if you have it, or you can probably find it at a couple places online. But otherwise, I suggest using your own pictures. Alright, let's go ahead. So I guess that spacer was for that end. But I got this, this locomotive was advertised as for parts or repair. So this was a totally failed installation. And I'm not sure why, since this thing was dead on the track, we haven't had a chance to try it. Okay, so I've got the motor in there in the bracket that it originally came in. Not going to glue it yet, but I am going to glue it, and I'll show you that in a minute. What we're going to do now, before we glue it, we're going to test this thing to make sure it works. So let's get our solder pencil cleaned up here. Okay. Let's get our flux, yellow handle screwdriver. Let's take the nippers here. Alright, so let me figure out how much I need here. Let's see if you can see this. So I'm going to clip it about right here. And as you've seen many times now, the reason why I like this wire is because I just pinch it and pull it. There we go. See the black wire, cut it about right here. And we will just pinch and pull that one. That's why I like that wire. Let's do the other side. Cut it. Pinch it and pull it. Red wire. Pinch it and pull it. These little ends here, I generally save them if they're that long. Always some little wire you need here and there. Okay, now I want to tin all 4 of these leads. So I'll take, let's do this. Do them all one time. So let's get some flux on them. Okay. And as I said before, I'm using my workbench has been for many years particle board. And I like particle board for this. This is one of the reasons why I like particle board the most, because I like to touch my soldering gun right to the desktop. And someday when this gets super dirty, I will sand it. My old one got really paint spilled everywhere and chemicals and everything, and I just sanded it down when I wanted it back to normal. Alright, let's go ahead, tin it. If you are new to soldering, you want to tin your parts. That means getting some solder started on each side that you're going to join. You want to do that because it makes it so much easier to solder then. Okay, now all of our parts are tinned. And like I said, I'm not going to glue this. Whoops, I didn't secure the worm housing. Okay, I'm not going to glue this until I get it soldered so I can try it. Because here's what happens. Some of these installations, as I have seen, especially with doing a lot of these motors I get from eBay, despite my best efforts, they run backwards. And then I have to undo them and flip everything around. I like my wiring to be lined up nice and clean. Alright, let's do a little more. Even though I've already made my spots here on this little stand-in piece that I like to make, I'm going to put a dab of flux on each one again. They already have solder on them, so I should be able to just touch it and leave it. Alright, there's one. Just that simple. Just touch. I'm using a very small soldering pencil. Now, sometimes I like to use the tweezers. And as I've said before, somewhere I read, guy, master modeler, who said get good tweezers and learn how to use them. Well, I'm trying to make that into a habit, and it really does help in wearing like this. And I got a set of these, 6 of these black tweezers for a couple of bucks. They weren't hard to get. Okay, now I got the couplers ready. I didn't forget about that. Let's go ahead. Let's put this on the track and try it. All right, here it is on the track. I now know why this is a failed installation. Okay, so I've got the motor taped on instead of gluing it because whoever started this at first, they were not able to overcome a mechanical problem that this has. But I think we can do it. Okay, let's take a look here. Sounds like it's probably pretty good, right? Well, hear that little clicking noise it's starting? Little clicking noise going on. Okay. Now on my test track here, this is a number 4 switch. This is a number 6. This is one of the first tests I like to do, is a number 4, number 6 transition. That helps me test that middle axle, see if it's got floating abilities, and it does. However, you hear that little clicking creeping in there. Acting pretty decent right at the moment. There's the click. Let's try a more difficult test, 4 to 4. 2 number 4 switches. So far, so good. Oh, I can't replicate it right now. It seems to be settling down. There it is again. But I totally know now why this thing was abandoned and stripped. Remember our first clue was I told you there's a little spacer inside one of those joints. Ah, there we go. We just jumped the track, didn't we? And that is an indicator of what I'm going to show you now. So, the problem that this thing has, and I said it was suspicious that those ball joints are missing a pin, and that was probably what this person had tried to do to fix this. What is happening here, and it's this one right back here. There's a tiny little spacer. See that little white strip stuck in there? You can see it from the side. You see that little white piece right there? Right there. Okay, that's what they did as a solution to one side. On this side, it doesn't have it. And what happens is these couplings are not reliable. In fact, they can slip completely out. That is probably why there are pins sheared off. And looking at it under magnifying glass, the pins are sheared off. There's also been some milling. Possibly, it looks like they heated it up with a soldering pencil, at least on this side, to adjust the distance to take up this slack that's happening here. And so when I was going across the switches, this coupling shaft actually disengaged, and it came, that clicking was it just partially spinning around, not engaging the worm drive. That is the problem that we have here, is that these things are not in the place they're supposed to be. Now I can't, if I shove it all the way in there like that, it does not have, it will derail all the time. The reason there are ball couplings on here is so that these things are in exactly the right place. It gives them a little up and down movement. This thing doesn't have a lot, but it has some. And then you need to have that. Thing is, keeps on slipping. And there's barely any pin here. That pin is so close on here. It's just gonna slip. The more you run, it's gonna slip. So what I'm gonna do now is I am probably going to insert a little piece of styrene in here, just like they did on the other side, to make kind of a little spacer. Or I'm going to attempt that'll be my second choice. My first choice is I'm going to attempt to take up the slack in these couplings, in these joints. I'm going to try that first. If that works, we're going to stop at that. Alright, so we were able to fix the problem. What I was able to do was I was able to move these joints out to take up some slack, and I took a screwdriver this big, I put a drop of super glue on the end of it, and I just put it in next to the shaft. That is not going to stop me later from taking these off after I find out that these things are supposed to have 2 pins on them, which I suspect they are. And that indicates to me that this thing has some other mechanical issues that we don't know about yet. But for now, we're working. Let's go ahead and secure this motor in place. So here's what we want to do to secure this. I am going to use goop, and basically any kind works. As far as I can tell, I can't tell the difference in trains between all the different kinds there are. The other one that I like too is shoe goo. I have a feeling they're the same thing. Okay, so like I said, there was already in here, somebody had made a little foam pad there. It gets the motor up to the right height. I'm just going to take some of this goop here, and I'm just going to put a glob like that. That is how I am going to secure this motor. Now there are a couple of reasons I use this kind of glue, and I don't go for bolting it in or anything like that. One of the nice features about this kind of glue, number one, I can change my mind and I can just peel this up anytime I want to. That's number one reason to do this. Number two reason, this type of rubbery kind of glue, it sure does cut down on vibration, unwanted vibration. If you are familiar, these motors have vibration that will, if you use something real rigid to hold this in place, it will eventually vibrate it completely out of it. So now we don't have to wait a long time, and this motor is ready to roll. We're going to give it, I think we'll give it an hour or two, and then we're going to put it through its paces. But before we do that, I want to show you what I have chosen for couplers. So what I've got here is these coupler mounts on here. If you can see those. I don't know what couplers were on here since it didn't come with any. But there's already a 256 threaded hole in it. So I thought, well, let's see if we can use that, if we can. And so I've got, these are Bachmann Easy Mate. And if you can see close enough, get into focus here. These are overshank. And these overshank couplers happen to fit in here just right. For a cover, I don't know where or when I got these. These look like KD number 5 covers for their draft gear, but they're not. They're called KD shims. And I've just got a whole pile of them, and I've always used washers to shim. These are super fine shims. For this coupler, they make a very nice little coupler box cover after being trimmed a bit. They work real slick. One of the things I do have to do See this pin on here? I do not cut my pins. I keep them because my magnetic uncouplers work. So this pin, I need to bend it just a tad bit up. And if I get the pin in the plier jaws, so I'm only putting pressure on the pin, just barely, just a tiny bit. And now that one is going to clear. It's going to clear my gauge. I'm going to show you how we check these. Okay, I'm going to bend up this one just a little bit. Okay, there we go. I bent the other one. You bend those to check them, and then I use this is what I use. KD number 206 coupler gauge. And I'll show you what the difference is. I don't remember what number this one is, but this is the old one, and it's all metal. So when it's on the track, it shorts it out. You can't put power on it. It's got this magnet in the, or this thing in the end of it, and I don't remember what that does. I have to look at the instructions, but it's used for something. Here are the new ones. That one I just showed you, the 206. That focuses in. The 206 is a plastic housing, so I can put this on the track. And I have a couple of them, so I'll put them on each end. And over here, you will see I have a magnet right here. I've got one of the under track magnets here on my workbench, and after this goop is set up in a little bit, we're going to go ahead, install the couplers, and then we're going to check them with the gauges and a test car. Alright,